Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today we are talking, appropriately enough, on Halloween about a story that effectively kind of came back from the dead here, and that is the James Harden trade. Um, the saga around James Harden demanding a trade and wanting to go to the Los Angeles Clippers was something that dominated headlines throughout the offseason, despite, realistically speaking, not a lot of actual movement towards a trade of any kind. So, there were a lot of people who were wondering if this was going to just kind of die off and go away, or if something was finally going to happen. And in the early hours of the morning on Halloween, we did get the news that Harden has now been officially traded to the Clippers. So, real quickly here, we'll go through the actual specifics of the trade, throw stuff up on the screen right now. The Los Angeles Clippers receive, obviously, James Harden. They also get PJ Tucker and Philip Petrusev. Don't know the pronunciation on that one, apologies, but they get those three players from the 76ers. Meanwhile, Philadelphia gets the lion's share of actual things being sent their way. In terms of players, they receive Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris Sr., Robert Covington, Kenyon Martin Jr., and then a slew of draft picks. They get an unprotected first-round pick from the Clippers. They get second-round picks in both 2024 and 2029 from the Clippers. They get a first-round pick swap in 2029 from the Clippers, and they get a protected first-round pick in 2026 coming from Oklahoma City. In exchange, the Thunder are getting, I think it's a 2027 pick swap with the Clippers. So no actual players being sent to or from OKC. They're just here so that one more first round pick could be thrown the 76ers way, which I would assume was a major part of the negotiations, because without that extra first round pick, this trade looks a whole hell of a lot like the multiple offers that we've been seeing over the past couple of months that got turned down. So that's the specifics of the trade here. Don't want to linger on that for too long, because we're going to talk about what the trade means. And, there's going to be a million people telling you about that, so I'll try to keep this quick as well. For the Clippers, this is an unbelievable, massive win for them. Right? They added one of the most elite offensive players in the game in James Harden. Maybe not a reputation as the greatest of defenders, but whatever. But they add Harden to their lineup. That gives them one more incredible piece of sort of firepower for their offense. You combine him with guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who have so far looked healthy. I know we're like only a couple games into the season, but still, they've been looking pretty good here. And then they add another piece. And speaking of pieces, the Clippers really didn't give anything up here to make this move. It's really mostly about the draft picks. Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, and Kenyon Martin Jr. were all players who were very low on the depth chart, not playing the greatest amount of minutes, not seeing a regular spot in the Clippers rotation in the first place, at least not through the first week or so of the campaign. So moving them doesn't really matter. In fact, I think maybe at least 3 of the 4 guys are on expiring contracts, which is part of the reason they're being sent to Philly. But the guys who are putting up the stats and playing major minutes for the Clippers, guys like Powell, Zubats, Terrence Mann isn't playing because he's kind of hurt, but he was someone that was being talked about as part of this trade that the Clippers didn't want to send. So Powell, Zubats, Mann, Westbrook, even if you want to throw him in there. Those were all big names who theoretically could have gotten swept up as part of this trade package, and the Clippers kept all of them. So they really don't sacrifice much. Their first 7 or 8 guys deep in their rotation remains exactly the same, and then they add Harden to it. So the Clippers look incredibly powerful right now. The concern that you would have is the draft picks being sent away, especially considering the fact that the Clippers are still kind of recovering from all the draft picks that they sent to OKC in the Paul George trade. That was still sort of long-lasting ramifications, but for the most part, the Clippers have weathered that storm. Paul George has been in Los Angeles for 3 or 4 years now, so a lot of the picks that they sent are... the damage has been done, so to speak, right? And if you're the Clippers and you pick up James Harden like they do here, are you concerned really about your first round picks in, certain years in the near future when you're now vying potentially for a championship? The Clippers have to assume or have to believe that adding Harden to this lineup makes them a potential championship contender. So if you are going to play that well, giving up your picks is going to be less of a burden. And it's a risk the Clippers are willing to take. Meanwhile, looking at the other side of this for the 76ers, honestly, they still walk away winners in this situation. I know looking at the actual balance sheet of the trade, people might be wondering why the 76ers couldn't get more, at least in terms of players. And there is a little bit of truth to that, but the honest, real truth here for the 76ers is that this is a trade that they just needed to make. It had to happen. James Harden was not playing for the 76ers already, right? He had missed most of training camp, most of the preseason, and hadn't played a regular season game yet. The league was starting to ask questions about, hey, with the new rules that they have trying to regulate players resting and missing games, how come you have a star player who hasn't shown up yet? And the heat was starting to get turned up on the 76ers a little bit, and they needed to make a choice one way or the other. Either keep him and convince him to play or send him off right now. And they obviously chose the latter. And they do still get something back for their trouble, right? They do add some players. Again, they weren't seeing crazy minutes on the Clippers, but I could see someone like Batum or Robert Covington especially, who's already played for Philly in his career, picking up some of the minutes that the outgoing PJ Tucker had been holding, right? Because as I mentioned before, PJ Tucker is being sent to the Clippers as part of this trade. He was in the starting lineup for the 76ers on most nights. So, someone's going to have to step in and take up those minutes. Maybe someone like Batum or Covington is the guy to give you 10 to 15 in that spot. Meanwhile, the draft picks that the 76ers collect really could help them make decisions regarding their future, no matter which decision that ends up being. If some of the rumors coming out are true and there is a possibility that the 76ers trade Embiid, then they blow it up. They start rebuilding again, and you have the assets from this Harden trade to combine with the assets for an Embiid trade or from an Embiid trade, and you are suddenly sitting on quite a few draft picks to try and rebuild the entirety of your roster around Tyrese Maxey, I guess. I don't know. He'd be the next guy up, I suppose. Assuming they wouldn't trade him as well. If the 76ers aren't looking to blow everything up, however, and do want to continue building around Embiid, then you've picked up draft capital that, realistically speaking, you could then pivot, turn around, and use that as a trade to pick up a new partner for Embiid. Not sure exactly who they would target in that scenario, but that is a possibility for them, that they could just try to find a running mate for Embiid by trading those assets away rather than actually using them. But either way, having these picks coming in from the Clippers and the Thunder gives them more leverage to use, regardless of which path they actually decide to go down regarding Embiid's future with the team. So that's the analysis of the trade. But now I want to get to my most important point, and I will try to wrap things up at this stage. The saga is over, right? The trade is over and done with. We have spent the better part of 4 months talking about this. I've made multiple videos on it, which obviously I didn't have to do, but it was the news, so it kind of felt the obligation. But the question at the end of this is, what was, realistically speaking, the point of any of this? I don't mean the trade itself. I mean the 3 or 4 months of dancing around whether this trade was going to happen or not. I said similar things about the Damian Lillard trade, right? Where it seemed like the negotiations were stalling, teams weren't really arguing in good faith. That's part of the reason why Dame isn't in Miami right now, is because a lot of people dragged their feet and alternative solutions were found. This situation's kind of even dumber. So Harden requested a trade. He said exactly where he wanted to go when he requested that trade back in like July or something like that. He said he wanted to go to the Clippers. The 76ers said, hey, we'll try and find a trade, but we're not going to guarantee you that you go to the Clippers. And then they said, we're not going to trade him at all. And then they said he's going to show up to training camp and he's going to play, and Harden didn't. Basically, Harden said exactly the way that this was all going to play out every single time. And Daryl Morey and other people in the 76ers organization said, that's not true. That's not the way that it's going to play out. It's going to happen XYZ way. We're going to hold out to get Terrence Mann or some other such from this trade. And then they just didn't, right? The season started, the league started asking questions, the threat of fines came in, and then the 76ers ended up making a trade that looks a lot like what we all thought the trade was going to be in the first place, and Harden goes exactly to where he wanted to go when he demanded the trade. The best you could argue, I think, here is that the 76ers squeezed another first-round pick out of this, right? The pick coming in from Oklahoma City is that second first-rounder that the Clippers themselves were a little hesitant to hand over. But that's it, right? 4 months of negotiation, I use that word, very lightly, for another first-round pick when there was so much talk and so many stories about how the relationship between Harden and the 76ers was deteriorating to such a degree. And that's really the only movement that happened. One more first-round pick gets added onto the pile. So, if you're asking what did we learn from this, what we learned was the players are realistically going to get what they want. And I don't know. The 76ers did make the most of it. As I said before, I think they got something good out of this. I just don't understand all the posturing, all the empty talk, all this, that, and the other, and trying to drag this out for as long as they did, just to kind of go and make the move we all thought they would in the first place. So, I don't know. Being in a front office for a team can't be easy, but this whole situation felt really dumb from the very start. And the best thing that we can say about it is that it's over now. So, that is it. That's my opinion. Very frustrating, but hey, the Clippers get their guy, the 76ers get players and assets. I don't know if it's an equal trade, but it's a trade where both sides get some sort of benefit. And that's the best you're going to do. But let me know what you think. Who, quote unquote, won this trade? Did the 76ers get fleeced? Which is always a term that, NBA Twitter loves to throw out there. But which team comes out ahead in terms of what they wanted here? Which team do you think has a better chance of competing in their conference? We'll put it that way. Do you think this puts the Clippers up there in the space of teams like the Suns and the Nuggets? Meanwhile, for the Sixers, what do they do now, right? Do you think that they trade for a big star player to try and keep up with teams like Boston, teams like Milwaukee, or do they just kick the can down the road and maybe see what develops in the offseason? Because they've got some decisions to make. But please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching. Happy Halloween, and I will talk to you later.